Hey everyone, I wanted to do a deck tech on this deck that we've been calling Junk Angel. We've been running this deck the whole entire season, ever since States back in October, right after the big rotation. We've been making changes ever since. I'll kind of go over those as we go through them, but this is the deck list that we're currently running right now. One small side note, I know this is built on Magic Online. This deck you actually can't play on Magic Online because there's an infinite life combo, and to click through all the triggers on Magic Online just doesn't really work. So this list is meant to be played in real life. We actually have a version that we play for Magic Online that doesn't use the infinite life combo, and we make a switch right here where we put the Centaur healers in the main, and Fiend Hunters we actually board in against aggro because we still like them against the aggro matchup, whether or not the infinite life combo works or not. I'll go ahead and show you the infinite life combo. There's two ways. Actually, there's only one way to do it anymore. There used to be two ways to do it when I'm actually going to add a card to the deck. And if you want to keep this card in the deck, then you can go ahead and do that. But we used to have a 1 of Tristani in the deck. The combo works with Seraph Sanctuary. If you have two Fiend Hunters right here and a Restoration Angel, you can infinitely loop these 3 creatures. And every single time the Restoration Angel comes back into play and blinks one of the Fiend Hunters, you gain a life off the Seraph Sanctuary, and you just keep looping it until you have a trillion life. The other way it worked is if you just have 3 Fiend Hunters in play, 3 Fiend Hunters can loop with each other, but obviously none of them are angels, so it doesn't work with the Seraph Sanctuary. But when we used to have Tristani in the deck, then you could do it that way as well. Same thing with this way. You could do this one, the 2 Fiend Hunters and Restoration Angel with the Tristani as well, but Tristani is no longer in the deck, so we still have the Infinite Life combo, but we just don't use Tristani anymore. The reason we cut Tristani is it was really hard to get her online, and then the Infinite Combo online as well, whereas Seraph Sanctuary just being a land was much easier to just have that in play while we were going off. Not to mention it was also harder to have 3 Fiend Hunters in play, as opposed to having 2 Fiend Hunters and 1 Restoration Angel. Just statistically, it's easier to find that combo, so we ended up cutting her. We actually didn't hate this card. She was alright. We used to be running a lot more Armada Worms. Actually, I'll talk about this card in a second, but the good thing about Tristani is if you had nothing to do, you could populate Beasts and then here Worm tokens, obviously. So there's some cute stuff you can do with her, and then the life gain's obviously great. But yeah, so the Infinite Life combo is great because obviously if you get that off against an aggro deck, or actually against most decks, unless you're playing against Band Control and they're trying to mill you out, I haven't yet had a person try to play it out against me. They've just scooped. Although I have heard of some of the other people we've been playing with who their opponents will just keep playing, which is annoying, but then, you just gotta beat them. So, the cool thing about this deck is you get to run 22 lands, and that's a really low land count, which was one of the advantages of Delver last season, was it just had such a low land count, that it just made it more powerful than the other decks. The reason we could run such a low land count is because our initial count, we have the Pilgrims, which kind of work as lands, but we also have the Mulches to find lands, so we can just keep pretty much any 2-lander in this deck you can keep, which is great because a lot of times in other decks you'll keep a 2-lander and then just draw spell, and not curve out. Whereas in this deck, being able to mulch and Grizzly Salvage on turn 2 makes it's pretty guaranteed you're going to hit a land. Not to mention if you have a Pilgrim or Farseek on turn 2, you can still be going up the curve on those cards as well. The Mulch and Grizzly Salvage, obviously this is a pseudo-reanimator deck. The reason I like this deck more than the other dedicated reanimator decks is that it doesn't fully revolve around the Unburial Rites and the, around the Unburial Rites. Like, the dedicated reanimator decks are just trying to get, like, Grizzlebrand or Craterhoof or Angel of Serenity out from their graveyard. They're really not looking to cast it from their hand. Whereas in this deck, we're running a lot more, like, threats that we're willing to hardcast, and that's why you see the playset of Cavernous Souls. We love caverning our creatures into play. Cavern naming Human, Cavern naming Angel, Cavern naming Beast hits pretty much every creature in our deck, from the Pilgrim and the Fiend Hunter with the Human. You see the Zealous Conscripts in the sideboard as well. Restoration Angel and Angel of Serenity are both angels, and then Thragtusk and Craterhoof Behemoth are both beasts. And there's also plenty of times that I've named Worm for Armada Worm as well. So yeah, Farseek is in the deck. Farseek, one of the best cards in Standard right now. This deck needs it just because a lot of the times you're not just trying to reanimate, you're just trying to ramp into a Thragtusk, which is totally fine, because you can like turn 1 Pilgrim, turn 2 Farseek, turn 3 Thragtusk, and if you're on the play against any aggro or mid-range deck, like, you've already stabilized, and then like once you play Angel of Serenity, it's just, it's game over from there. The thing I really like about this deck is, again, the low land count, but being able to run the Mulch. The Mulch is so great in this deck, and so is Grizzly Salvage as well. But both for the same reasons. The Mulch gets your Unburial Rites, it gets your targets for Angel of Serenity to the graveyard, and it also finds your Cavern Souls, which is one of the most important cards in the metagame right now. Like, with counterspells as good as they are with Syncopate and Dissipate, you really need to be caverning your creatures into play. You can't just be tapping out for an Angel of Serenity and hoping that they don't syncopate you when you're playing against like Bant Control or Grixis Control, because they just run really high levels of counterspells, and not to mention they run Augur Bolus to dig for them. So much like we run Mulch and Grizzly Salvage to dig for our caverns, they have the Augur to dig for their counterspells. But we get twice as many of them, and ours are better because they hit Unburial Rites and also feed our Angel of Serenities. So the synergy with these as opposed to Augur Bolus are much better, and it's also much harder to blank on these, whereas the Augur blanks quite a bit. The Fiend Hunter's in here because this deck does have quite some issues with aggro. This deck can have some slow curves, like when your turn 2 is a Mulch or a Grizzly Salvage, and your turn 3 is like a Farseek and a Mulch, and like you're on the draw against an aggro deck, they can obviously just kind of run over you. Being on the play helps a lot. But once you do start getting to the turns 4, 5, and 6, like, this deck is very, very hard to beat. I actually played in a tournament against a guy, and he played Tamiyo, got her up to 9 and ultimated her, and brought her back down to 1. And then he played a Liliana, got her up to 6, ultimated his Liliana on me. And then he played a Sorin, got Sorin all the way up to 6, ultimated him, and destroyed 3 of my creatures. And I still ended up winning the game because he had been using Azorius Charm all game with the Tamiyo ultimate had gone off. So he's just drawing card after card after card. But I gained infinite life, and he ended up having less cards in his library, so he lost the game. So this deck, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's really hard to go bigger than this deck, because with Angel of Serenity, if they're not exiling your threats from the graveyard, especially in Game 1, because no one has any, like, Reanimator hate Game 1, unless, like, I've seen some Bant decks running the main deck Ground Seal, which I think is a good idea, because it shuts off the Angel of Serenity, but you don't see it very often. So the Angel of Serenity can really go crazy in Game 1. So that's one of the reasons I really like this deck, is because the standard metagame right now is all about going over or under Thragtusk, meaning that you either have to move faster than Thragtusk or you have to do something bigger than Thragtusk in order to win the game. Thragtusk is just such a powerful mid-rangey card that... I'm sorry, it's a mid-range card, but it's so powerful that it's pulling all of the control strategies and all of the aggro strategies towards this mid-range card. And so the format really just revolves around him. He's like a black hole of Standard right now. And you really can't build a deck right now and just ignore this card, because there's really no card that beats it. Actually, when I designed this deck, my idea for it was, we realized how good Thragtusk was, and so I asked myself, okay, how can we play as many Thragtusks as possible, as fast as possible? And that's where this deck came in, and we even back it up with a Cavern of Souls as well. I seldom play my Thragtusk without a Cavern Naming Beast if they have any kind of blue source open. This deck's very consistent. I really like how... that's one of my favorite things about it, is when you open up hands with this deck, there really aren't a lot of... Like, obviously there are bad hands, but... most of its openers are keepable, and also even mulling to 6 and 5, it really isn't that bad. Like, a lot of the 5 mulls you see are, like, totally fine. It's like land, Farseek, Mulch, and Fatty, and you're like, snap keep. And so that's one of the big reasons I like the deck. The other big reason is that it has Thragtusk. Obviously, you probably won't see me building a deck in Standard for probably until this card rotates, or if they print some kind of good answer to it. You won't see me making a deck without 4 of these in it, unless I'm trying to go under Thragtusk, but yeah, I don't know. Restoration Angel is very good in this format as well. Works really well with Thragtusk. Also works well with a Fiend Hunter, and also turns on our Infinite Life combo. Unburial Rites is in the deck for obvious reasons. Armada Worm. This is actually an extra slot, and actually one of my testing partners, Ryan Richardson, runs a second Seraph Sanctuary in this slot. So he runs a 23rd land instead of the Armada Worm. And I don't think the deck needs 23 lands, but Ryan really likes the Infinite Life combo, and I don't disagree with it. So if you want to run the 23rd land because you're afraid of getting land screwed, then feel free. But I'm always a little bit greedy, so I'm running the Armada Worm right now. And then you have the 4 Angel of Serenity, which is just such a house against aggro. You can chain the Angel of Serenities, which everyone knows about now. I remember when we first started working with this deck, Angel of Serenity was like $9 or $10, and we bought her out, and then I think like 2 weeks later she went up to like 25, and with good reason. She's amazing. This isn't a card that should be underestimated. And then Hoof is another card that we discovered very early. I remember buying these at $3, and then recently they came out with the Hoof there at his deck, and he spiked up to 16, 17. I'm sure he'll fall back a little bit, but Hoof is also very good in this deck with having like a couple Fiend Hunters and like Pilgrims on the board, and then just slamming a Hoof out of the graveyard. Or sometimes you'll like mulch an Unburial Rites and the Hoof will also be in the graveyard, and it makes it really awkward for them because they can't just like tap out and pass turn to you, because you can just play the Hoof and smash them for 20 plus damage. So they always have to be making really awkward plays to play around this card, and he'll just steal a lot of games for you. He's a beast. Literally a beast. And yeah, his creature type for the Cavern is extremely relevant as well. I hardcast this card out of my hand a lot against bank control, and there actually should be a second one in the sideboard. I actually just got a new computer, so I had to remake this deck list. I believe this guy comes in, I forget what it is, but we'll pretend like we have 15 cards in the sideboard. So going to the sideboard, we have Deathrite Shaman, which is, I bring this guy in, obviously it's mostly for Reanimator matchups, which you don't see a lot of Reanimator right now, so if I had to cut a card right now, it might be a Deathrite, as much as I love this card. But he also comes in against certain other matchups where, like, sometimes you want to side out your Infinite Life combo for whatever reason, or like if you're going up against Selesnya aggro and they have, you notice they have like Rest in Peace and like Dryad Militants, and I mean already there that's 8 cards to hate on your graveyard. You see people like really hating on the graveyard, so sometimes you side out some Unburial Rites, and you just need something to side in because you don't have a ton to side in. So Deathrite Shaman comes in as just a good card. I really like him. A lot of the problems with Deathrite Shaman in Standard is that his first ability to ramp you isn't very useful, but with the Grizzly Salvage in this deck, you can like Grizzly Salvage, reveal the top 5, take the Thragtusk, and pitch lands to the graveyard to feed your Deathrite Shaman to kind of ramp you into your fatter drops later, which is nice. Sever is in here. This originally used to be for Entreat the Angels, and we used to have 2. Right now, I bring it in against pretty much any mid-range deck that's trying to play Thragtusk, or I still bring it in against Entreat the Angels. I bring it in against Angel Serenity decks because being able to exile their creatures rather than just destroy them is much more effective, since the Angel Serenities can just keep chaining. So you really need to just get rid of these entirely. So Sever's good for that. Rare Revelation is one of the cards I've been wanting to cut, but I think you need to keep it in because there's certain enchantments. The main one is Detention Sphere and Oblivion Ring. When you go up against a band control deck that's running, a fair number of those, like you're really happy to have this Rare Revelation. It's also great because you can mulch it and salvage it to the graveyard, and it's still a threat, which is nice. We also have for our, you'll see we have a 2-1 split on our enchantment here. We like Acidic Slime more because we really like using the Restoration Angel with it, and it's also nice because we can target it with our Angel of Serenity and Unburial Rites. Acidic Slime we actually didn't add that card until much later to our sideboard, and we've been extremely happy with Acidic Slime, and I've actually been considering mainboarding this guy in this format because, like, once you start knocking off Bank Control's lands, it's really hard for them to come back because, like, they can't be tapping out for any big Sphinx's